Hello to all my dear followers. I'd like to welcome you to a new chapter of What if Naruto trains to become a Genjutsu master alongside Kurenai? At the top right of the screen, I've left a card with a playlist showing all the chapters of this fanfic in order. Please, I ask for your likes and comments so I can bring you more chapters. Without further ado, enjoy.
Sasuke, Naruto yelled as he landed atop the Shodame's head inside the Valley of the End. Sasuke, whom had just landed on the opposite side of the valley, atop his own ancestor's head, turned to look at Naruto, rage burning in his eyes as he looked at his former teammate. Naruto's face morphed into a dispassionate look as he beheld his, now traitorous, ex-teammate. He thought back to this morning, remembering how it had been an entire week since his disastrous date with Kurenai. A sharp pain entered his heart as he thought of his girlfriend/ex-girlfriend. He still wasn't sure where he stood with her since he hadn't tried to contact her, and she had yet to do the same. He had been training in his special spot, attempting to remain away from the regular populace, and managed to do that for most of the day. It was early afternoon when he ventured back into the village, looking for a late lunch from Ichiraku's, when Shizen ran across him and immediately sent him to Tsunade's office. Naruto had been upset, but reported almost immediately, and upon arriving, had been briefed that Sasuke had left the village last night. Naruto's hand had clenched, hearing his teammate had abandoned the village that had pampered him so much. To top it off, Shikamaru had been assigned the mission and set off with Neji, Kiba, Chuji, and Rock Lee, whom had been healed by Tsunade and cleared for duty for only one day. Almost immediately, Naruto had tensed when he heard Tsunade mention that she didn't have any Jounin or Chunin to send after them until, at earliest, the next 3 hours, and Shikamaru was not to be expecting any reinforcements. Naruto had asked why he hadn't been contacted and Tsunade shrugged, having said that she wasn't even sure if he was in the village because she hadn't had anyone who had seen him for the past 3 days, when he had dinner with the Naras. Despite the fact that his commander might not know where her forces were, especially a Jinchuriki, Naruto had been angry with himself for isolating himself, as it was obvious that Shikamaru and Yoshino had picked up on his mood when he ate with them. They had been delicate and, when he mentioned he didn't want to talk about it, they had backed off. Naruto had offered to go reinforce the team and Tsunade smiled lightly as she looked at him. "I'd figured you would, and I give you second in command of the team. Do what you must to bring Sasuke back." She trailed off before making her next order. "If you cannot return Sasuke, the Sharingan can't be allowed into enemy hands." She sighed heavily as she looked into Naruto's slightly surprised eyes. "Do you understand, Chunin Uzumaki?" she asked, purposefully using his rank and name to make him understand the gravity of the situation. Naruto had nodded and immediately turned from his commander, heading out of the village with all of the speed he possessed. It hadn't taken Naruto long to catch up to the fading Chuji, summoning 15 shadow clones, 3 to carry his friend back to the village, and the rest to escort them. Naruto had a fierce appreciation for his big-boned friend after the crater he saw surrounding his opponent. He hadn't allowed that to slow him though, quickly moving on. He arrived to watch as someone shoot a spinning arrow towards Neji's tired and battered form. Naruto hadn't wasted a second, dipping down and grabbing Neji just as the arrow launched through the space that Neji had been in moments before. Naruto hadn't wasted any time, quickly going through a few hand seals, and his opponent was caught in a Genjutsu for all of 2 seconds, and those few seconds resulted in Naruto blasting the guy with a fully powered futon. Kamaitachi. The thing that fell from the chopped trees was only remotely human, and Naruto had paused only a moment to make sure the guy was dead before summoning another 4 clones to accompany the heavily bleeding Neji. Naruto leaped into the trees, feeling chakra signatures on both ends of his range, healers from Konoha's direction, and 2 sources that were flaring further ahead. He had run ahead, finding Kiba and Akamaru harmed, as well as an unharmed Kankuro, down in a valley, but the hardhead had waved him off, saying he had already defeated his opponent and was slowly making his way up the wall of the valley. Naruto had moved on yet again, wondering who it was that was left. His answer came later, seeing Temari near his closest friend, had a smile on his face as he saw his friend mostly unharmed. Shikamaru had hurried him along, telling him that he needed to hurry to help Lee. Naruto had moved quickly, coming across a fierce battle between Gaara and some dude who could easily manipulate his bones. Naruto had watched for a few moments, before he skirted the battle and dashed to where he felt his teammate fleeing. Thus, we find ourselves in their stare-down. "What is it you want now?" Sasuke asked, anger evident in his voice as he looked at Naruto. Naruto's eyes narrowed at Sasuke. "What exactly do you think you're doing, Sasuke?" he asked, looking at his teammate with a curious face. Sasuke scoffed. "As if you care, dope," he said as he sneered, liking how Naruto's mouth twitched at his perceived slight. "You're the one who left the team because you could see that the team was only holding us back," he admitted. Naruto blinked in surprise as he looked at Sasuke. "I should thank you, actually. Because of you, I managed to see my error and found my way out of the slump I had unknowingly put myself in," he said, looking at Naruto with an appraising eye. "You know, I had always thought you were an idiot, but you actually seem to be able to use that thing you call a brain, if only slightly," he said haughtily. Naruto blinked again. Letting his teammate talk was allowing him the chance to test their surroundings and get a feel for his mental state. "Really?" he asked, non-committedly, as if what Sasuke had just said was mildly interesting. Naruto was actually really worried about someone else being around to help Sasuke reach wherever he was heading. If the power of the person he had just passed was any indication, Naruto would be in for a serious fight. Sasuke smirked. "Of course, you overlook even the most basic of things," he offered as he looked at Naruto's slightly curious glance. He smiled wider, though it held no mirth and only a dark undertone. "Don't tell me you didn't realize it," he said with a slight tone of astonishment. Naruto's doubting gaze was his answer. "You would have to be more specific than it, Sasuke," Naruto retorted, almost satisfied that he would be capable of launching an attack on Sasuke without anyone else around. Sasuke chuckled, reminding him eerily of Orochimaru. "Oh, this is rich. I can't believe you, a censor, couldn't sense the way that the Hokage keeps track of their most high-profile ninja," he taunted, causing Naruto to frown. Sasuke smirked, looking for all the world like the cat that caught the canary. "I noticed my ANBU detachment almost since Kakashi had started to train me in chakra detection. Don't tell me you didn't sense them, Naruto. It's how they keep an eye on anyone they consider a flight risk or high profile to the village," he reiterated, and Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly, thinking back to when he had become a censor and tried to remember if he ever felt any ANBU near his house. It didn't take him long to shake that notion. "You're out of your mind, Sasuke. I never had an ANBU team following me. The only person who can hide from me is Erosenin and Orochimaru," Naruto said confidently. At least they were the only ones he knew of. Sasuke blinked in surprise before his smile returned. "Then, it makes me wonder what type of observation they have on you, Naruto. I know for a fact that there is a mission regarding your continued loyalty to the Leaf. The elders couldn't keep their mouths shut when I mentioned how you were getting stronger so suddenly," he said, obviously trying to attack Naruto's conviction. Naruto, admittedly, wouldn't put it past the elders and the Sandaime to order an observation in order for the safety of the village, but that wasn't important right now. Now, he was sure that they were alone and he could take care of Sasuke himself. It was when Naruto moved. However, when Naruto's sensor quickly noticed a chakra signature moving quickly towards Sasuke from the other side, Naruto made the choice fast, knowing he had one shot at this, and cast his fastest and most effective Genjutsu to disorient Sasuke. Megan, Narakumi no Jutsu. He knew it was a long shot since he had already hit Sasuke with this Genjutsu before, but he had little choice. If the chakra he felt was real, he was about to be in way over his head. Unfortunately, Sasuke was ready for him. His Sharingan flared to life and Naruto felt his Genjutsu shatter almost as soon as it took hold. Sasuke smirked and Naruto took a step back as an eerie chuckle floated across the valley. Well, Naruto-kun. I hadn't expected to see you so soon after our last encounter," his snake-like voice whispered. Naruto grimaced as he saw Sasuke glance at Orochimaru with a glint of dark desire as Orochimaru placed a hand down on his shoulder. "Orochimaru, can't say this is a pleasure," he said through gritted teeth, his body tense and ready to spring at the slightest movement of the snake Sannin. Orochimaru chuckled again. "Well, this is a pleasure, Naruto-kun," he said happily. "I wish to repay you for almost killing my medic," he said angrily, and a snake shot from his sleeve, heading towards where Naruto had been seconds before. Naruto had leaped to the side, avoiding the probably poisonous snake quickly. Unfortunately for Naruto, This was Orochimaru's plan as a hidden snake, the color of the rock surrounding Naruto, launched forward as soon as Naruto's feet left the ground, sinking into his side with a vicious hiss. Almost immediately, Naruto dropped to a knee as he landed, feeling the poison within his system doing a quick job on him. His vision grew blurry and Orochimaru and Sasuke both smirked at him as he fell forward from his weakness. "Take this gift from myself, Naruto-kun. Consider it in turn for delivering Sasuke-kun to me the way he is," he said as he and Sasuke melted into the ground from Orochimaru's unique jutsu. Naruto cursed once more in his head, wondering if Kyuubi could flush his system. "This poison is particularly potent. No doubt he chose it because he knew exactly who you are. It may take a bit before I can. I'll see you when you wake up, brat, and I want you to go train more. That was pathetic being caught off guard so easily," Kyuubi remarked from its cage, and Naruto sent a mental scoff at that before his eyes closed and he crashed to the stone beneath him from the poison taking effect. Naruto groaned as he took in the familiar smell of the hospital. He flexed his arms and legs, feeling the stiffness of his muscles that was probably because of the poison he had been injected with. He cracked an eye open and immediately shut it when light flooded into his dilated eyes. Movement by the window and the shutting of the shutters alerted Naruto to the fact he wasn't alone, and Naruto's sensor picked up a person he hadn't seen in almost 2 months. "I turned the lights down, Naruto. You can open your eyes." Kakashi's voice floated to him from somewhere on his right. Naruto cracked his eye open again and sighed when he didn't have to shut it again. The lights of the hospital had been dimmed, so it was a comfortable light that slowly allowed his eyes to adjust to having light within them. "How long have I been out?" he asked. His throat was rather parched, and he was slightly surprised when Kakashi handed him a cup of water before answering. "About a day. That poison was perfect for you. Probably one of the only types that would have affected you that well," Kakashi said. Naruto nodded. "Orochimaru is definitely one of the only people I would have expected to be able to counter me so effortlessly," he admitted. Even though he didn't respect the man as a teacher, he could respect the ninja that stood in front of him on his merits alone. Kakashi nodded. "I figured it was Orochimaru. When I got there after you, all my pack and I could sense was Sasuke and a snake had managed to disappear into the ground. I couldn't follow their scent anywhere and I hurried you back to the healers," he admitted. Naruto eyed his former sensei, trying to decide exactly how to take that statement. By what he was saying, Kakashi would have followed Sasuke and left him to die if he had been able to follow his scent. It took Naruto a few more moments before he rejected the idea. Despite the fact Kakashi had not followed his code in terms of the team, he would follow that code on the mission, and Kakashi would have secured him transport back to Konoha before heading after Sasuke. Kakashi locked eyes with Naruto for a moment before the man turned away, unable to hold his gaze. "I'm sorry, Naruto," the man said after struggling for a few minutes in the silence that fell between them. Naruto blinked. Never had he heard the man sound as sincere as he just had. At least not with him. Naruto was about to ask why when Kakashi spoke again. "I'm so sorry for my actions as your sensei," he clarified. Naruto's surprise was rather evident, as well as the anger that took over after that. Naruto didn't say anything, however, merely staring at the averted eyes of his former sensei. "I know you would never allow me to be your sensei, Naruto. I don't think I even deserve the honor of having called you a student. I never taught you anything," he admitted, and Naruto's anger abated slightly from the obvious shame and regret that Kakashi was emitting. The fact the man was here, apologizing so sincerely, was a large step for the man who had acted as if he knew what was best for Naruto since he had met him. "You already knew teamwork and the tree climbing exercise. You were the glue who held the team together until they tried to tear you apart. I was trying to allow you all to come to terms with your own issues and work together, sort of like you did for the bell test, but it failed. They pushed you too hard, and I should have stepped in to stop their constant beratement of you, as well as their unresolved issues," he said. Naruto again blinked, watching as Kakashi took a deep breath before sighing just as heavily. "Why did you refuse to train Sakura and I when you offered training to Sasuke without him asking?" Naruto asked. Kakashi blinked and hung his head. "I was assigned a mission to keep him in the village. He was considered a flight risk and I was given leave to teach him anything I wanted. I had offered him training before you too because I wanted to make sure that he knew it was on my terms, not his own. I didn't want him to think he could ask for whatever he wanted and he would get it. Kakashi explained. Looking at Naruto, he continued, I was going to follow my own sensei's plan. I made you work in teamwork until I felt you were ready, right before the wave mission for your team, and then I would wait for you to ask for help before actually teaching you. I believed that if you didn't want to ask for help, then you didn't need it. It was to help you realize that you can't do everything on your own. He explained. Naruto thought about it for a moment, placing himself into Kakashi's shoes and nodded, understanding the man's stance but, at the same time, not thinking it was the correct approach. After having denied him help for close to 2 months, Naruto was not about to ask Kakashi for help. Okay, he said, and Kakashi raised his head, looking at Naruto with slight hope in his eyes. But what about the month during the Chunin exams? He asked. His voice was cold but not frigid. Kakashi shook his head. I have 2 reasons for that, though neither are excuses for that debacle in my teaching you, he admitted, looking at Naruto again. The first, and most obvious, is that I never expected you to ask for help since you had been ignoring me for close to a month already, Naruto. Your abilities had increased and you sought help from others before me. I never expected you to ask or accept my help, so I sent someone else, and I was pretty sure you were going to deny him, but I wanted to try, he said, and Naruto ceded that with how Naruto had been acting, that was a reasonable deduction. The second is the same reason that I had taught Sasuke. We were fairly sure that the reason Orochimaru had attacked your team was for Sasuke, and the Hokage wanted me training him exclusively to repel attacks as well as to ensure his loyalty to the village. He admitted with disappointment in his voice. While I failed in that regard, I do regret teaching him the Chidori and the way he used it upon you, Naruto. I had told him never to use it on a comrade and he completely disregarded me. I apologize, Kakashi said with heat in his voice, obviously angry about the way Sasuke had used his prized jutsu. Silence fell between the two as Naruto digested what he had said, and reconciled that he wasn't angry at Kakashi for his teaching. He had failed in regards to their team, but his methods were not wrong and he had reasons behind everything he did. It was much harder to hate the man when he understood that Kakashi had just made an error in judgment in regards to his first genin team. So, Naruto trailed, looking at Kakashi. What do you want? He asked, wondering why Kakashi was apologizing. He wouldn't ever accept the man as a teacher. The way Kakashi's face raised, locking with Naruto's own, did bring a strange warmth to his chest. I was hoping that, considering such a horrible job I did as your teacher, you would be capable of forgiving me enough to consider me a friend, Naruto. Naruto's surprised expression was complete. This was not something he would have expected. I realized that I wasn't a good sensei for your team, so I decided that I would try to reconcile with you and become your friend. I want to get to know you as a person and not treat you as a student. By all accounts, from Asuma and Kurenai, you are a remarkable person and I want to get to know the person I should have had a hand in helping to cultivate, he admitted. Naruto thought for a moment, looking at the sincerity that was shining in Kakashi's eyes with a penetrating gaze before his gaze softened ever so slightly. Answer me this, Kakashi. If you were Sasuke's anchor to the village, what is my own anchor? He asked, the idea that Sasuke had planted in his head sprouting from what Kakashi had said. Sasuke said he could feel the ANBU team that followed him around the city, but I can't feel any presence that follows me to make sure I remain loyal, he admitted. As a Jinchuriki, I should be one of the highest profile ninja in fear of running. Kakashi blinked before his eye darted to the window. He closed his eye, feeling a pulse of chakra from Kakashi before Kakashi opened his eye again. What I am about to tell you could get me thrown in prison, Naruto, he said seriously. Naruto nodded. To tell ninja what their loyalty protection is can be seen as a severe breach of trust from the Hokage, he informed Naruto. I know when you were younger you had an ANBU team that watched you, and, as far as I know, they have never stopped that. Even as I taught you, the Sandaime kept the ANBU around you. I have no idea what your current detail is, however, since I was taken off of your sensei about a month ago, he admitted. Naruto nodded. So, I have minders, but I probably can't sense them? He asked. Kakashi shrugged. Or, the Hokage is keeping his minders close to chest. He could assign another mission without my knowing if he really feels you warrant the attention, which you already said you do. I'm not the Hokage, nor am I one of his advisors. I'm not privy to every one of your secrets, he admitted. Naruto looked at Kakashi for another few minutes before he nodded. Thank you, he said with warmth. And I appreciate you wanting to be my friend, even if it is just to make up for your horrible teaching, he admitted, watching as Kakashi's slumped shoulders, for the first time, raised. Friends, Naruto asked, raising a stiff hand in an attempt to shake Kakashi's hand. Kakashi smiled as he stepped forward and shook Naruto's hand firmly. Friends, he said warmly, before he stepped back. Well, I asked Tsunade-sama for this chance to talk to you and promised I'd let her know when you awoke. I'll see you later, Naruto, he said as he stepped out the room. Naruto let out a light sigh. You can stop hiding there on the sill, Erosenin. Come on in, he called out in a strained voice. Jiraiya's head popped up from the other side of the window and climbed in, pushing the blinds aside and striking Naruto with a burst of light that had Naruto clenching his eyes close from the brightness. Naruto peeked at his master, and the inquisitive look he was trying to hide must have been picked up. I have no doubt of your loyalty to Konoha, Naruto. You have people you want to protect here, and you won't allow them to be harmed even if the rest of us hated you. That's all the insurance I need, he assured Naruto, and I have no idea about the Minders Sarutobi-sensei might have assigned. I do believe that there aren't any ANBU members I know that would be capable of hiding themselves from your censor if you actively looked for them. I know Tsunadeheim hasn't assigned anyone either, Naruto, so I'd suggest you drop it. It's something you're going to have to live with. I know I do, he said with a wry chuckle. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Jiraiya chuckled again. What? Just because I was the only loyal Sannin, you don't think I have Minders while in Konoha's territory? He asked, and Naruto shrugged in response. Anyways, I was just checking in on you. Thought any more about the trip? He asked. Naruto shrugged non-committedly. Admittedly, he had thought about the trip, but he was loath to be gone for 3 years from his home. A little, but I don't want to leave for 3 years, he admitted. Jiraiya nodded. I understand. I won't argue that it's a bit daunting, especially for someone of your age, but I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't think it would really help you survive, Naruto. Please give it a bit more thought, he said seriously. Naruto nodded and Jiraiya then climbed out the window again. I'll talk to you in a few days. You know where to find me if you need me before then, he said as he giggled perversely before he vanished as Tsunade entered his room. Naruto relaxed in the bed after Tsunade had left. He thought back to what Kakashi and Jiraiya had admitted, and the seed that Sasuke had planted grew inside Naruto. Naruto wondered with an insatiable curiosity whom his Minders might be. Jiraiya had said that he knew of no ANBU that could slip past his chakra detection, and Naruto had spent hours in meditation flexing and testing his chakra sensor. He would have noticed if there were any signatures near his private training ground. This begged the question, who are my Minders? He muttered to himself lowly, not wanting anyone to overhear him, despite being alone in the room. He would have already escaped the hospital if Tsunade hadn't threatened to tie him to the bed if she found him out of his bed before she dismissed him later today. He swore that he had seen a mischievous glint in her eyes as she told him she wouldn't release him just yet. A light knock on his door interrupted his thoughts of ways to get out the hospital without being punished. Come in, he said as he sat up. He smiled when he saw Shikamaru step into his room. Unfortunately, his smile slipped when he saw the morose mood that Shikamaru was in. What's wrong? He asked. Shikamaru stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him and pulling the only seat in the room up next to Naruto's bed. It hit Naruto like a tonfa when Shikamaru's bags were made prominent from the closeness that his friend showed. Chuji is in the ICU. Niji is stabilized. Lee is back in the hospital. Kiba and Akamaru are forbidden from missions for the next 2 weeks, at least, he said hollowly. Naruto raised an eyebrow as he looked at his friend, wondering what exactly Shikamaru was building up to. This was usually how he expressed a problem, listing the reasons or causes and then getting to the crux of the matter before being capable of solving it. You were poisoned. We needed help from the sand. I got off with just a broken finger. And he trailed off, and Naruto remained quiet, knowing Shikamaru needed to work out what his real problem was before he could do anything about it. I shouldn't have led that mission, Naruto, he said brokenly. Naruto blinked in slight surprise at the conclusion that his friend had come to about his own mission. Every member of my team is hurt horribly. Put out of commission for 2 weeks at the least. For the least hurt of us all, and Chuji almost died because I left him there by himself. Naruto could feel Shikamaru's mood worsen as he kept speaking, driving himself deeper into a depression that Naruto was slightly familiar with. Niji is only stabilized because you showed up when you did. Kiba and Akamaru would be dead without Kankuro, and so would Lee and I if it weren't for our backup. It's a miracle that we didn't all die, Naruto, he exclaimed. Naruto nodded his head. It is. He agreed, and Shikamaru's slightly incredulous gaze was his answer. But, do you know why we aren't dead? He asked. Shikamaru just stared at him, a lost look in his eyes as he looked to Naruto, for the first time, as someone who could help him instead of the other way around. Naruto knew Shikamaru had helped him tremendously so far, and he was more than willing to discount Shikamaru's worries when he could. Because you were the one leading them. He could see the doubt clear as day, but he didn't allow Shikamaru to speak. Shika, it's because you believed in the skills and abilities of your team that you almost managed to capture Sasuke without me with you from the beginning. You made the hard decisions in the course of the mission, and everyone survived because of it. The fact you failed your mission doesn't mean anything. I was the one who ultimately failed you, not being capable of capturing Sasuke when he was in my grasp. I wouldn't even consider your mission a failure. Every single one of your comrades is alive and on their way to recovering. No one died, and that is a better record than most team leaders, he said strongly, pouring his admiration and respect for Shikamaru's actions into his words. I'm the reason everyone is hurt, Naruto, he said with a hint of desperation in his voice. How could I ever lead a team knowing that my decisions cost lives? I can make that decision for myself, not for others, he said. Naruto stared down his friend with a frosty glare. So, you would let those who are less suited to lead become leaders when you have the chance to stop it? He retorted, seeing how Shikamaru's mind turned. You would step aside and let those with half your intelligence make those decisions and cost the hundreds of lives that your decision might only cost one? He paused a moment, allowing that thought to penetrate into Shikamaru's thought processes. He launched his next strike as soon as he saw Shikamaru begin a counter-argument. Grow up, Shikamaru. You know that you are smarter than almost anyone in the Shinobi Corps. So you failed your first mission? Learn from your mistakes and correct them so the next time, you don't repeat them and save lives. Naruto punctuated the end of his speech with a harsh slap of his hand on his bed, while not as noise-making as he had hoped. He did see his words and actions had gotten to his friend. Silence engulfed the two of them for the next few minutes as Naruto watched his friend carefully. When Shikamaru's eyes met Naruto's, Naruto knew he had succeeded. Thank you, Naruto. I think I need to go train, he said as he moved to leave. I'm glad to see you're all right. Let us know if you wind up going on that trip, okay? He said as he stepped out of the room. Naruto blinked at the sudden departure of his friend, but a smile spread across his face as he recognized what Shikamaru had said. That lazy ass is going to train, ha! He thought to himself before he chuckled as he laid back in his bed. I figured you'd have run as soon as you realized that you were in the hospital, brat, Kyuubi said from its cage. Naruto shot up. Hey, fuzzball, he greeted, getting tired of playing nice with the great beast that took every chance to degrade him. Kyuubi chuckled malevolently. Much better than you, I'm sure, weakling, Kyuubi retorted. Naruto rolled his eyes. I'm not the one stuck in a cage. He thought back. Are you completely sure about that? Kyuubi asked with a tone of curiosity in its own voice. According to your teachers, pathetic bunch that they are, you can't even breathe without your Hokage knowing about it. Is my cage so much different from yours? Kyuubi didn't end its tirade with the usual malevolent chuckle. Instead, it actually seemed to want Naruto to answer its questions. Naruto thought for a moment. I don't know. He thought back quietly, realizing that the Kyuubi did have a point. While Naruto may have a sense of freedom with minders of the sort that his teachers had alluded to, Naruto was as trapped as Kyuubi was. His cage was just one of a different making. Then, do something about it. I abhor the mere thought that my container may be so shackled by his village. Kyuubi retorted. Naruto shook his head. And what exactly would you expect me do about this? If Kakashi doesn't know about my minders, then how would I manage to get the information? He shot back. Kyuubi's arrogance knew little bounds. Naruto heard the great beast heave a large sigh. Watch your tongue, you insolent brat. I'm trying to help you and you're turning me down. You took the first step in bridging our connection. Now I'm taking the next, Kyuubi admitted, and Naruto blinked in surprise. Now, to answer your question from before, are you, or are you not? The man who snuck into the Hokage tower and stole a precious scroll right out from under the Hokage's nose when you were barely trained? Naruto blinked, and then blinked again before face-palming himself from his absolute buffoon moment. Interesting prospect, but the fact of the matter is, I did get caught from doing that. If I do this and get caught, it's very likely I'll get put away in an ANBU cell until they manage to figure some way of killing you with me because of village security. He thought back. Naruto felt the Kyuubi give him a mental shrug. Then remain their little weapon, but I will not be lending you my power if you can't find some way of either removing the Minders or you find out who they are. It said before retreating from Naruto's conscious mind. Naruto sighed as he ran a hand through his hair. On the one hand, he could place his trust in the village and not risk his career by breaking into the Hokage tower again to find out if he had Minders. On the other, he could break that trust, gain access to his files, and figure out what the village actually knew about him. Naruto thoughts whirled in his head until Tsunade dismissed him. Later that night, Naruto cursed in his head as he looked upon the Hokage tower. "You ready?" he asked the Kyuubi. Naruto had thought long and hard upon whether he should do this. 5 hours of intense debate with himself, and the occasional comment thrown in by Kyuubi had left him with little choice but to invade the tower and figure out who his Minders were in order to keep his current level of power. That's not to say that was the only reason he was doing this. Far from it. Naruto was hoping he may be able to find something on his parents or anything else that might have been hidden from him by the Sandaime. The entire thought had left Naruto desperately wanting to hope out of his hospital bed and run into the tower that instant. The allure of knowing about his parents was a strong pull on Naruto's decision. Once Kyuubi sent a mental nod, Naruto stealthily made his way past the guard patterns that he had picked out from watching the tower's defenses for 2 hours. Naruto would have some suggestions for Tsunade after this was done. He slipped down into an alley, making his way through the shadows of the night and next to the wall that surrounded the tower. He waited until he felt the shinobi's chakra pass behind the wall before leaping over and landing with no sound on the other side. He looked around before dashing across the short space and slipped into the door leading into the back of the tower. Naruto sighed lightly as he made his way down the halls of the administrative branch of the tower. There were few guards within the tower itself if the Hokage was not present. Something Naruto was able to tell with his sensor. It took Naruto little time to find the records department and reach the level where the records were stored, bypassing each guard and keeping his noise to a minimum while he stalked the halls. Naruto looked at the door leading to the storeroom where his name should be filed, and a sense of trepidation filled him as he laid his hand on the handle and pushed it open. He braced for the trap he suspected was there and was disappointed when he didn't even see a seal glow in response to his intrusion. He frowned and stepped into the room, looking up and down the rows for the name Uzumaki. Naruto made sure to close the door behind him as he moved cautiously towards the row he suspected held his name. Naruto wasted little time and soon found his name. Picking up his folder with caution, Naruto's eyes flashed around and his sensor remained alert to any seals flaring before he sighed a small sigh of relief. Naruto was about to open the file when he heard the door open and 2 men stepped into the room. Naruto's eyes flashed as he quickly took 3 steps back, then ran through a few seals and erected a small area around himself that would camouflage the fact he was here. He waited with bated breath as the 2 guards moved towards him, silent as he had been. Naruto watched, silent as a hawk, as the guards moved closer to his own row. His eyes narrowed as he watched them almost ignore the rest of the room as they moved directly to where he had been standing not 5 seconds ago. One of them looked around and watched their backs as the other looked where Naruto had just taken his scroll from. The man stared for a few seconds before looking at his fellow guard and speaking in a low tone. "The alarm said that someone had taken from this hole, but I can't see any that are missing." Naruto's eyes widened. He hadn't felt any seals flare when he touched the scrolls, but he had still set one off without ever knowing. "Let me check," the other guard said, and they switched positions. Naruto's hands flashed as he saw the guard reach for the scroll that wasn't actually there. "Did you hear that?" the guard said as his hand snatched back and towards his kunai pouch. "Yeah," the other guard said as they both nodded and moved back towards the door, where the scratching could be heard. Naruto breathed a small sigh in relief as his genjutsu led the guards away from him. He needed to read this file quickly and then return it before they returned to check. He flexed his sensor again, making sure none of the guards were on their way here when he quietly unwrapped the scroll and began looking for what he wanted. He noticed that the most recent information was at the end of the scroll, so he would have to go almost to the end of the scroll to find out who his minders were, as they were probably assigned when he was much younger. He quickly unrolled the scroll as fast as he could. Taking note of the mission scrolls he had submitted had been placed in his file by storage scrolls. He reached the last 2 rolls of his scroll and took a shuddering breath, flexing his sensor to make sure those guards weren't on their way back just yet, before he unrolled it and his eyes went wide. "Damn," Kyubi said from its cage. Naruto blinked as he looked at the personal information and protection detail mission that had been assigned to him had numerous red stamps on the information. Nothing could be read as big red letters blazed into Naruto's eyes. Hio. Hokage's eyes only. It is only proper my container's information be protected beyond all others, but this makes things problematic. Those files are probably chakra keyed to the current Hokage. Kyubi said from inside his mindscape, and Naruto cursed as he realized that Kyubi was right. It took Naruto a few moments, but his desperation quickly turned to determination. "I've come this far. I'm not going to be deterred by this. I'll go to the Hokage's office and look through the desk. If I can't find anything there, will you be satisfied?" Naruto asked Kyubi. Kyubi grunted and Naruto rolled the scroll up quickly and placed it back while he waited for the Kyubi to agree or disagree. It was as Naruto felt the guards begin moving back towards the room that Kyubi made its decision. "Yes, let's go," it said as Naruto canceled his camouflage Genjutsu and moved to the other side of the room. Naruto waited until the guards moved back into the room and slipped out the room as they walked back to the row Naruto had left his scroll in. Naruto moved through the halls like a ghost, his pranks and training allowing him to prowl through the halls with seasoned movements. Naruto knew the path he had to take to the Hokage's office and he wasted no time in getting there, avoiding patrols easily. Naruto stood in front of the Hokage's door and hesitated but a moment as he pushed it open quietly, slipping inside the room with practiced ease. He took a moment to look at the darkened room, lit only by the moonlight coming in through the window behind the expansive desk he imagines himself behind. The room looked slightly eerie, devoid of light as he was used to, but the moonlight lends an ethereal glow to the room that makes Naruto realize exactly how wrong what he was doing was, at least, according to the Konoha Charter. He hesitates only a few more moments, debating on leaving before he can be caught, but his resolve hardens and he steps to the desk, making sure to keep his sensor on full alert as he creeps around the wooden desk and crouches down to observe the 6 drawers that are on the desk, 3 on each side of where the Hokage sits. Naruto reaches forward, grasping the handle to the only cracked drawer. Each of the other 5 were completely sealed, and pulled it open slowly, grateful to the fact that it slides open with no resistance. He looked inside and cracks a smile as he sees a bottle of sake along with 2 saucers. "Leave it to Tsunade to have sake inside her desk," he mumbled to himself as his eyes rake over the drawer. He was about to slip it closed when he noticed a slip at the back of the drawer, only visible because of his angle and the moonlight. He carefully removed the sake bottle and 2 saucers before running his hands down to the bottom of the drawer and feeling for the groove. His actions were rewarded with a slight pop as the fake bottom of the drawer was released, popping up and revealing 3 scrolls. Naruto swallowed and flexed his sensor once again, making sure no guards had gone off route, and he felt that the 2 guards in the records room had moved out from the room and seemed to be heading out of the tower. He reached forward hesitantly, grasping one of the scrolls and reading its name, S-Rank Mission Assignments, it said, and Naruto set it back inside the fake bottom. He picked another one. This one read, Uchiha Itachi. His eyes widened as he looked at the scroll, wondering what the famous betrayer of the leaf had done to warrant a scroll inside the Hokage's own desk. Most likely, the scroll should have been inside the regular records vault, just like all rogue ninja. Naruto shook his head. He wished he could read this, but he could only risk it if his own file wasn't the last scroll. He couldn't take it out of the office either, because the next time the Hokage looked, they would know that the scrolls had been touched and Naruto didn't really want to be investigated for this. He placed the scroll next to him and reached for the last scroll. He brought the scroll up to his face and flipped it to face him. Uzumaki Naruto. The scroll's name read and Naruto's heart beat faster. He quickly replaced the Itachi scroll, and flexed his sensor once more before literally flinging the scroll open in his haste to learn about his parents and his minders. Naruto's eyes racked over the top of his scroll. Red letters once again blocked his thirst for knowledge, and he cursed as he held back the tears of frustration that threatened to leak from his eyes. Hokage only? Is that to mean that only the Hokage can know? Kyuubi questioned inside his mind, and Naruto had to agree. The information must be passed down verbally and held inside the Hokage's mind as a failsafe to keep anyone from learning his parents' identities. That only begged the question, who the hell were my parents if only the Hokage is privileged to such information? I'm also betting that others know my parents, probably Kakashi, and Jiraiya, certainly Tsunade. Their reactions to me were completely different. He thought to himself. Naruto vowed to himself to get that answer from someone once he had moved up one more rank. When he was a jounin, there was no way they could deny him his question. Regardless, he moved on, getting to the main reason he was here. He read the file and his hands grew sweaty as he realized the implications. Mission. Observation. Subject. Uzumaki. Naruto. Reason for mission. Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Method of mission. ANBU team. Duration of mission. Until graduation of Shinobi Academy. To be taken over by sensei or other means as designated by presiding Hokage. Mission assigned. ANBU team 2 rat, snake, dog, and cat. Mission accomplished. The accomplished had a red stamp saying it had been accomplished and that each of the ANBU team had been paid for an A-rank mission every month. He blinked as he read the next part. Mission. Observation/loyalty. Subject. Uzumaki. Naruto. Reason for mission. Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. Flight risk. Method of mission. Seduction. Duration of mission. Undetermined. Mission assigned. Yuhi Kurenai. Mission accomplished. Ongoing. Naruto fell back onto his butt, his eyes wide and his mind whirling as the Kyuubi chuckled malevolently. Oh, this is perfect, it crowed from inside Naruto's swirling emotions. She is a wily one. I believe I spoke too soon when I felt you had picked the right mate. She is absolutely the best actor, and the best mate you could have picked is one steeped in illusions. Good job, Brett. Kyuubi retreated into his mind, laughing uproariously as Naruto's feelings of love came crashing back. The pain and heartbreak he had felt the night of Kurenai's rejection was harsher and more profound. He could hardly breathe as he looked at the paper, her name and the word seduction leaping out at him, taunting him, telling him he knew nothing of the woman he thought he had loved, telling him that everything she had done was just an illusion that she had created to keep him in the village. Naruto felt tears battle at his eyes, but none would come. He sniffled once, just once, before taking his shaking hands and rolling his scroll back up and placing it back inside the fake bottom. He quickly placed the sake and saucers back as well. Naruto stood his face as icy cold as it had been when he first felt his team's betrayal. He showed no emotion, his emotions having been snuffed out by the fact that his love and his supposed Gigi had led him around by the nose just to keep him in the village. No longer, his ties with his Gigi were forever broken. Never again would he look so kindly upon the old man whom had ruined his life so readily. His feelings about Kurenai were confused, but he felt the overwhelming betrayal first of all and decided he would deal with his feelings about her later. He knew he needed to get out of here, and he would do so using the training of a ninja, by placing all feelings aside and completing his objective with a ruthless efficiency. Indeed, Naruto excelled when he placed his objective above all others. He was like a ghost as he passed through the corridors of the tower, easily bypassing any possible detection and arriving outside the tower without raising an alarm. He didn't even pause as he stepped out into the moonlight, disappearing from view as if he had never been there and bypassing the roving patrols of shinobi with an ease that he knew only Jiraiya or an ANBU could match. Naruto didn't head home. His deadened emotions allowed him to prioritize his objectives. First, he made 2 clones, sending one to go get Jiraiya, whom he was sure was still up, despite the late hour, and the other to wait at the Nara household. He, himself, headed to the heads of the previous Hokages, settling himself above the spiky locks of the 4th, so he could see the village in its nighttime glory. He knew it wouldn't take long for Jiraiya to notice something was wrong with him, but Naruto had one test for the Sannin whom he had come to trust above all but Kurenai. He wanted to give that man one last chance, only that one, because Naruto's trusting days were over. Everyone else he ever made friends with were always going to be held at arm's length to avoid the hurt he had been placed in once again. Jiraiya appeared in a cloud of leaves with a frown on his face as he looked at the cold face of Naruto. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, the concern in his voice gaining him a few points on Naruto's scale already, though Kurenai's concern had seemed genuine too, and he had to remember Jiraiya was a master shinobi and spy, immersed being able to fake emotions. "Do you know who my parents are?" Naruto asked, focusing his entire being on Jiraiya and trying to suss out if the man would lie to him or be truthful. That would decide what Naruto's next action was. A tense silence fell over the two as wind whipped their hair past them. It looked to be a showdown between two powerhouses, and Naruto supposed that it was as Jiraiya drew himself up. "Yes," he said, and Naruto's eyes widened. Jiraiya frowned prominently, obviously displeased with Naruto's response. "I have known your parents since you were young, and I always disagreed with Sarutobi-sensei from keeping you knowing about them," he admitted, and Naruto could sense the man was being truthful to him. "Why do you ask?" Naruto opened his mouth, about to spew the question he had long since longed for an answer. His own conscience stopped him, his will faltered, and he closed his mouth as he pondered upon that one question before he answered. "Because I wanted to know if anyone did. Sarutobi always said he didn't know, but he always lied about it, and I never knew if anyone did know," he said honestly, though his voice was rather monotone. Jiraiya's eyebrows raised, but Naruto spoke before he could. "Do you think I'm ready to know about them?" he asked, genuinely curious about Jiraiya's response. Jiraiya looked at him scrupulously, his eyes racking over Naruto's form before he responded. "I think that you could have the knowledge and not abuse it, as Sarutobi-sensei believed, but I wouldn't want to tell you just yet. I think you need to be a bit stronger before I would want to tell you," he said honestly. Surprisingly, Naruto wasn't angry with the man. The fact the man was being so blatantly honest was a surprisingly refreshing notion. "When?" Naruto asked, knowing Jiraiya would know what he was asking. "Solid jounin," he replied. "If you go on the trip, 3-4 months tops," he said confidently. Naruto nodded. "Thank you. I would like to go on the trip," Naruto replied, trusting this man with holding to what he just said, and this also got him away from the people he might just attack if he saw them now. Jiraiya nodded. "Okay. We can leave in a few days," he began, but Naruto cut him off. "I'd like to leave today. I want to train, and wasting the next few days doesn't make sense. I've already said my goodbyes and we have permission. Let's go," he said. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes as Naruto. "I don't know what happened, Naruto, but I'm going to get it out of you during training," he promised, and Naruto almost nodded from how serious the man was. "I would have waited till morning, but if you're insisting, it has to be now." He trailed off, looking at Naruto, who nodded. "Then we can leave. I'm always ready myself. I'll send a messenger towed back once we are out of the country," he said as he turned and motioned Naruto to follow him before disappearing. Naruto turned and looked at his home for the past 12 years of his life, and he sighed, knowing he was going to miss it, but he needed to train. He made 2 more clones, dispelling one so the clone at the Nara household could inform Yoshino and Shikamaru about his decision, while the other headed to the Ichiraka stand. Naruto let out another sigh before he too disappeared into a shunshin, not to be seen inside the village for the next 3 years. A tall blonde man sat upon the edge of a very steep cliff. His legs crossed and his eyes closed as he sat. His entire body was still, as if one with its surroundings and the things around it. The only indication that he was even alive was the soft movement of his chest as it rose and fell underneath his skin-tight green shirt. The snap of a twig had the man instantly rising, his right leg gathering his weight as his left swung out in an arc towards his opponent. The opponent grunted as he blocked the man's kick, and the two stared at each other for but a moment before the blonde man sighed lightly, and the opponent chuckled. "Damn, Naruto, your kicks hurt." Jiraiya's voice rang upon the cliff, and Naruto, whom was now staring at his master with a slightly affectionate gaze, retorted, "If you listened to me about not disturbing me when I'm meditating, then you wouldn't know how much my kicks hurt." Jiraiya chuckled again. "But where's the fun in that?" he asked jovially. Naruto grinned. "Being knocked down a cliff that's the size of Bunta. That's where the fun is." Jiraiya blinked and looked over the edge of the cliff, whistling as he looked down the sheer drop. "You sure know how to pick him," he said, and Naruto just nodded. Anyways, we need to go back to the hotel. Got someone who you gotta meet, he said, and Naruto nodded as he jumped into the canopy of the trees surrounding his cliff and followed his master back to their hotel in the village close by. As the two jumped through the canopy, Naruto thought back over the past 2.5 years of straight training he had been going through. The first few months were intense. Even while the two were traveling, Jiraiya had exercises and objectives for him to complete as they moved along the roads. Naruto had been very glad the man had been so intent on training him that he never asked him why he had been so eager to leave again. While Naruto was sure Jiraiya never forgot, Jiraiya hadn't even mentioned it during their past year's training, and Naruto was beginning to wonder if that was on purpose, or if the man had just decided the reason didn't matter because it pushed Naruto through his training at a pace that even Jiraiya had been hard-pressed to believe. The first few months had been chaotic, constantly moving and constantly training. Naruto hadn't been capable of even a few hours to himself before he was moving again in some shape or form. Before Naruto knew it, 6 months had passed and Naruto was being sat down by Jiraiya. The man had told him that he was proud of his progress and that they would be settling down for another month, which allowed Naruto for more specific training during that month. It was also at this point that Naruto had remembered what Jiraiya had said about his parents and his promise to tell him about his parents. Naruto had thought long and hard one day as he trained on whether he would demand of Jiraiya to tell him of his parents, but eventually decided he didn't want to risk having to talk about what had caused his immediate departure from Konoha, even at the cost of knowing his parents' names. Thus, Naruto had not mentioned his parents and Jiraiya had avoided his reasoning, and Naruto was left to ponder on Kurenai's actions in peace when Jiraiya would disappear for up to a week at a time with only a schedule left for him to follow. All of this time was spent going around in circles until Naruto decided he would only be able to make sense of what his life used to be when he was capable of going back to the village and confronting Kurenai and the Sandaime about her mission. Despite this decision, Naruto still felt his heart ache, as if it had been broken. He had always thought that the term heartbreak was an exaggeration, but the pain he felt on an almost daily basis once he broke the numbness that had pervaded his senses from the moment he found out about the mission to almost a month into his training was a testament to the reality of the word and the power that emotions held amongst people. Naruto had slowly mended from the break, though. He had spent months attempting to work out Kurenai's actions even after he had logically concluded that he would never be able to understand them because he didn't really want to accept the fact that she had only done everything because of a mission. He recognized that, deep down, he held on to a small hope that she did actually care for him beyond the confines of her mission. Regardless of this hope, however, Naruto did manage to move on from Kurenai's machinations. He decided that he probably wouldn't ever forgive the woman for her actions, but that he probably had loved her and he really had no idea how to handle that emotion. As a result, he determined that he would simply try to move on with his life, put those experiences with Kurenai to good use while he was away, and finally put a close to that chapter of his life when he managed to return in a few years. His heart still ached, but he was more prepared to look to the future and not to the past after this. After his decision, Naruto's training had increased, taking a more personal interest in his training, and began reducing the risky amounts of hours he spent training to increase his effectiveness. Even though Naruto was sure Jiraiya had seen the change, the man only commented on it once, saying he was happy to see him taking care of himself before pushing Naruto into the next leg of training. His training had gone well. His elementary mastery of wind was complete, having cut his waterfall almost 6 months ago now. His jutsu repertoire had been increased with the help of Gaara. The fact Naruto was good friends with the Kazekage, whose jutsu library was laden down with wind jutsu just collecting dust, was an extreme boon to his mastery. Naruto still didn't know how he wound up friends with a guy he had almost killed during the invasion, but he hadn't questioned it once Gaara offered to help him. He had spent another 3 months working on calling out specific toads and working in collaboration with them. His favorite to summon was actually Pa, who was simply impressed with Naruto when he first showcased his incredible Genjutsu ability. Naruto had only ever summoned Pa twice, once to be introduced to him and Ma, and then once more when he trained for 3 days with the old toad before the toad bid him good luck training and hoped he would summon him should he have need of him. Naruto had spent almost a year, interspersed months, on simply his Genjutsu ability. His casting and skill with the illusions was almost second nature at this point, and Jiraiya had even said that he was not looking forward to fighting Naruto when their training was over. Naruto had beamed a little but also felt a little tinge of something when he thought of using Genjutsu, as it always reminded him of Kurenai and her help. As a matter of fact, Naruto had promised himself that, while Genjutsu was a branch of the ninja arts he would be a master in, he would not limit himself to only that area. As Jiraiya and Pa had pointed out, Naruto possessed chakra pools on the level of the lower-tailed bijus. Surprisingly, after almost a year's worth of silence, Kyuubi had spoken once again, saying that while he held such chakra pools, he was to remain an illusion user as he was Kyuubi's vessel. Naruto had grappled with the idea of branching too far out from Genjutsu, seeing as he had wanted to prove Genjutsu's worth to others of the ninja world, but he had also realized something after Jiraiya's talk. He wanted to branch out because he did not want to be constantly following within Kurenai's footsteps and simply rely completely on Genjutsu. He was his own person and he would mold his own personal style while incorporating his two sensei styles together. He would be known by his own merits and not ride on the coattails of his predecessors. As such, about a year ago, Naruto had been pressing himself even harder, incorporating everything he knew into his own personal style of combat that he had finally tested against a few bandit camps until he grew confident of it and challenged Jiraiya to a spar. The first spar had landed Naruto with nasty bruises and a severe blow to his ego, but Naruto hadn't ever quit. After 5 months of intense spars and testing, Naruto had finally come into his own as a ninja and Jiraiya lay beaten beneath the panting Chunin mere days before today. Once Naruto had beaten Jiraiya, Jiraiya had woken and merely smiled at the young man now standing in front of him and told him, "I have little else I can teach you, Naruto. Why don't you try meditating?" He had suggested and Naruto had taken the suggestion, thus leading to today. Naruto's training had done wonders for his physique as well. He now stood at an imposing 5 feet 8 inches as opposed to his sensei's 6 feet 3 inches. While Naruto was a tall person, especially for a teenager not finished growing, this growth spurt had only really fixed the difference in his limbs, allowing his previous clumsiness to vanish completely. His body moved with a sleek disposition that Jiraiya had said made him look more ladies' man than ninja. Naruto had blinked at the reference but had taken the compliment where it was meant and enjoyed the way he managed to now walk or run without feeling awkward or uncomfortable in his own body. His body was toned and hard, not chiseled like Mike Guy's or Rock Lee's, Naruto would assume, but he was, nonetheless, a person whose strength should not be underestimated, despite his less than buff appearance. It didn't take long before Naruto and Jiraiya landed upon the street leading into the town. Surprisingly, Jiraiya wasted little time in moving to the hotel and then towards their suite. Naruto didn't feel the need to start a conversation with Jiraiya as they walked and, apparently, Jiraiya didn't either, so the walk was made in complete silence. Jiraiya and Naruto entered the suite and Naruto's eyebrow rose as he took in the woman sitting on the couch that was provided for the comfort of visitors. Momentarily, Naruto was struck with a blank as he looked at the woman before he spoke. "Samui-san?" he asked, and the woman looked up at him with cold blue eyes. "A pleasure to meet you again, Naruto-san," she replies with little emotion flecking her voice. Indeed, the woman sitting in front of Naruto is one that most men would be hard-pressed to forget once meeting her. Much like Tsunade, this woman has an ethereal beauty that few women can match, a body that leaves many women writhing with jealousy, and a detachment to the world that seems to draw men in like moths to a flame. However, unlike Tsunade, her detachment is not caused by drunkenness, but by a personal choice that is reflected by the cold blue eyes she bears. Naruto is momentarily flashed back to the Chunin exams as he looks up and down this woman's body. Her impressive cleavage seemingly even larger than before, and the clothing she was wearing, just like the last time, didn't bother to cover much of her cleavage, drawing most stares. Naruto was sure her clothing hadn't changed at all, except growing with Samui's womanly curves as she did. Jiraiya smiled at Samui. "The pleasure is all mine," he said perversely before Naruto smacked him on the head with a sigh. "Give it a rest, Erosenin," he said with just a little hint of affection in his tone. "What's she doing here?" he asked. "Your Hokage did not tell you?" she asked, a hint of surprise coloring her own tone. Naruto looked at her with a curious gaze. "Tell me what?" he asked. "That's what I came and got you for," Jiraiya said, now sitting on the single chair in the room, looking at Naruto as if the man hadn't just knocked him into the floor. Naruto looked back at Jiraiya. I told you I don't have much left to teach you, right, Naruto? He asked, and Naruto nodded as he kept an eye on Samui. The woman may be here as an ally over Kumogakure's and Konohagakure's recent alliance, but he would still keep a close eye on her. Well, I decided it was time to start doing missions again, but I still have a few more contacts that I need to see before we could head home, he said, and Naruto focused his attention on Jiraiya at this. So, I requested a mission from Tsunade, and she managed to get the fact I was going to send you off by yourself from me. Jiraiya did look a bit sheepish about this, but Naruto knew that the relationship between the two former teammates was close, so he couldn't exactly find that odd in any way. She demanded on sending someone with you, and she decided that this would be the perfect time to test out joint shinobi teams, so she talked with the Raikage. He trailed off a moment. Raikage-sama decided that I would be the best suited to team with you, Naruto-san, and quickly deemed that joint teams was something he was interested in. As a result, I am here as your partner for any missions you undertake in the next 6 months until you return to Konoha, at which time, this test will be evaluated upon our mission reports and client complaints or praises. Samui added. Naruto blinked as he looked between the two. Very well. Are we supposed to undertake a mission straight away, or are we allowed a period to get to know our partner's abilities? He asked. At this, Jiraiya looked a bit sheepish. Actually, you were supposed to have some time to get to know each other, but the client pushed up the timetable on your mission, so you will have to learn about each other during the mission, he said. Naruto glanced over at Samui, whom seemed nonplussed about this as she turned to Jiraiya. The dossier? She asked, holding out a hand. Jiraiya reached into his jacket and produced 2 scrolls, flicking them at Samui and Naruto both. Naruto reached out and plucked the scroll from the air with a practiced ease before flicking it open and reading the details of the mission swiftly. Yuki no Kuni? Naruto asked, and Jiraiya shrugged. I only asked for a C rank to get you back into the habit, but with Samui-chan here, he said with a suggestive wriggle of his eyes. It's classified AB with a possibility of being an A, he said. Naruto nodded and rolled the scroll up as Samui looked over at him. We have 2 days to reach the town where the ship is docked to take our charge to Yuki no Kuni. Are you ready to leave, Naruto-san? She asked. Naruto looked at Jiraiya. How long before you are able to rejoin with us? He asked. I may have beaten you in a spar, but I know you haven't used all of your tricks yet, Naruto said. Jiraiya smirked at him. You need real-life experience, Naruto. That's the only real reason you can't fight me the way you want. Come at me after these 6 months of missions and we'll see where you're at, he said with a challenge hidden in his voice. I'll keep in touch with Toads and you do the same, he said as Naruto nodded. Ready when you are, Samui-san, Naruto said, and Samui nodded. Both shinobis turned and made their way to the door. Naruto held it open and followed Samui as he and his new partner headed to their client's position. Good luck, Naruto, Jiraiya said with his eyes locked on the closed door. I hope you get over whatever it was that is keeping you down, he said before a lecherous grin spread across his face. Maybe student will follow the master and try for that God's gift to man on your team, he chuckled perversely. Naruto and Samui made their way through the canopy of the trees for almost the whole day without saying a word. Naruto and Jiraiya hadn't talked much when they were training or traveling, and Naruto had grown used to the silence that surrounded him as he trained. His every sense honed in the silence, and he felt no reason to break that silence if Samui didn't as they continued on their hurried trip. Naruto watched Samui discreetly as he saw her eyes rake over his own frame. There was nothing sexual in their looks. Naruto had grown used to the way women eyed him like a piece of meat about a year ago when his growth spurt had slowed and his sleek walk had apparently appeared. He paid most women no mind. He was not inclined to indulge in frivolous sex, and he was definitely not interested in making a relationship with a woman whom he would see for, at max, a month before he had to move on. As such, he had little contact with the opposite sex during his trip. Despite this, Naruto's eyes were marking Samui's stance and the way she moved, analyzing her like he would an enemy, to see what flaws might be there and what type of fighter she might be. While he knew from his previous encounter with her that she was a Genjutsu user, the sword strapped to her back and the smoothness of her steps indicated she was not above getting in close to the opponent and matching blades with them. That was one thing that Naruto still lacked, a close-range fighting ability that he felt confident about. His taijutsu was not weak, nor was he, but his ability of fighting in close range relied mainly upon his kicks, which left him to the mercy of a true master of taijutsu. He had played with swords for a bit, learning how to handle a blade from a master for about 5 months of training along with many other weapons, but no blade he ever held felt right in his hand like the master had told him to find. As of yet, he still lacked that essential blade that he felt would make his fighting style complete. When he had mentioned this to Jiraiya, the man had hummed about it, as if thinking it over for a minute before deciding that the blade training would have to be put on hold until he found the correct blade. Other than those observations, Naruto guessed that the woman was generally the one in the background, allowing others to take the brunt of the mission but dealing with everything she did with the finesse and skill that Genjutsu users were known for. Her eyes were analytical as well, and Naruto could tell she was a fine Genjutsu user, definitely a master, and that she would probably mesh well with his fighting style. He smiled lightly as he thought about the mission ahead of them and began to allow his mind to wander as his body automatically made its way through the canopy. Hours later, when the sun was lowering to the horizon, Naruto and Samui dropped into a clearing that they deemed suitable to build a camp in to rest for the night. Naruto gathered some firewood as Samui set up the campsite and, in short order, they had a small fire blazing, dinner being cooked, and a Kage Bunshin watch set for the night. Naruto stirred the pot, keeping a careful eye on their dinner as he felt Samui's eyes lock onto him. He let her look him over, wondering what exactly she was looking for before she spoke. "What is it that you have learned since your showing in the Chunin exams?" she asks. Naruto finished stirring the pot before turning to her with a raised eyebrow. A sense of déjà vu filled him as he smirked lightly. "I hope you don't think I'm going to answer that," he replies. Samui fixed him with a stern stare. "If we are to work together, then we must know each other's abilities," she stated coldly. "That may be," replied Naruto as he nodded. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to tell you everything I learned. What kind of shinobi do you think I am?" he asked. Naruto couldn't be sure, but he almost swore he saw her lip twitch, but the sign of approval in her cold blue eyes was evident, which prompted him to sigh as he stood and filled their bowls with the stew he had made and handed her bowl to her. He waited until she began to eat to speak. "Basically, I improved my Genjutsu, ninjutsu, summoning, and have been working on my taijutsu," he supplied. Samui finishes the food in her mouth before. "What level would you say you were capable of in ninjutsu?" she asked. Naruto sends her a suspicious look but responds, "Probably Jounin in terms of wind techniques or water, but Chunin in fire and lightning, basic in earth." He responded he himself was puzzled why it would be earth that would be the hardest for him to master, considering fire and lightning were the opposites of his two affinities, but he had no explanation for it and neither did Jiraiya, so he just worked past it. Samui took the information in with barely a blink of her eyes as she continued eating. "What about you?" he asked. "I know you're probably a Genjutsu user, and probably pretty handy with those swords, but I can't tell anything else," Naruto mentioned as he waved at her swords. Samui turned to him with a suspicious stare of her own, but Naruto has been forthcoming. Now it is her turn to return the favor. Her answer is long in coming. "I'm mainly a Genjutsu supporter, but I'm proficient with my blade. However, I prefer long-range combat and covert tactics." She paused a moment. "The brute force tactics are better left to the taijutsu masters or ninjutsu/taijutsu combatants," she stated tonelessly. "I have a wide range of lightning jutsu to use and basic earth defense jutsu," she supplied. Naruto nodded and a familiar silence falls upon the camp. Naruto had a feeling that the majority of their missions will be spent in silence. It was close to midday when Samui and Naruto touched down on the road that would lead them into the port town that was their meeting point with the client. In short order, Naruto and Samui were inside the town proper and Naruto looked up at the sky before speaking. "Lunch or mission?" he asked. Knowing this woman is not one for idle chat. Samui glanced at the sun herself before responding, "Lunch." Naruto nodded and looked around at the myriad of restaurants surrounding them. "Preference?" he asked. Samui shook her head and Naruto chose a random restaurant for them to dine at. Their meal was a quiet affair, much like their dinner and the breakfast this morning. The two shinobi ate their fill, taking in all of their surroundings with a careful eye. Naruto noticed that Samui does stare a bit longer at the drunks surrounding the bar portion of the restaurant they were dining at. He didn't know why, as her expression remains nearly emotionless, but it is something to take note of. Naruto paid for their meal and they both left the restaurant, heading towards the meeting point for the client. The both of them looked at the large building and shared a glance before walking towards the entrance, where two guards stand watch. The guards were tense, apparently ready for any attack that might be sent their way, something that caused a question to be raised in Naruto's mind. Most guards were relaxed unless there is an immediate threat. Naruto filed that away in his mind as he looked at Samui. A silent question passed between the two of them before Samui stepped forward. "We are here to see a same Sandeu," she announced in her cold voice. The guards looked at the two of them for a moment before one spoke. "You are the team he requested for the escort to Yuki no Kuni?" he asked. At Samui's nod, the guards waved them inside. "Just be careful when you enter the set," he said as Samui, followed by Naruto, stepped into the large building. The two follow the short corridor they find themselves in until it opened into a large cavity in the building, which displayed the size of the building from the inside. The two were assaulted with the sound of explosions and gusts of wind from a place to their right, where voices and shouting could be heard. Looking over to their right, they saw a temporary wall set up to block their vision from whatever is going on behind it. The two shared another look before they both approached it cautiously. While there are guards outside, it doesn't mean whatever is in here isn't dangerous. The two of them reached the divider that separated the vast building and Naruto peeked around the edge of the wall, while Samui watched his back. Naruto blinked as he took in the set of a movie, cameras and actors moving about the scene with practiced movements and the shouting, gusts of wind, and explosions were explained when he witnessed the special effects they are using. Naruto straightened and placed his kunai knife back inside his pouch. "They're just filming the movie," he told Samui, and she nodded as she relaxed slightly before they both stepped around the divider and await the scene's end so they can find out where this Sandeu person is. It is, perhaps, 10 minutes later when the director calls for a break that Samui asked a passing person, "Where is the same Sandeu?" The person hurriedly points out a gray-haired old man wearing black pants and a black jacket, sandals and a pair of glasses that rested upon his nose as he spoke with a large man wearing what looked to be the same uniform as the guards, except he had a badge with a large C on his chest. Naruto followed Samui as the two moved towards their client. As they near the man, Naruto can see his gray hair wraps around his chin, around his mouth, and connects to his mustache, forming a bushy but not thick beard. His beard, along with the squinting of his eyes, along with the way he carried himself told of a man who had seen many years and hardships that had hardened the man. "A same Sandeu?" asked Samui as she comes to a halt in front of the two men. The elderly man regards her with a critical eye as he replied, "Yes, we are the team you requested for an escort into Yuki no Kuni," Samui said while she waved to Naruto and herself. Sandeu's eyes lit up. "Excellent. Thank you so much for accepting," he said happily as he stepped forward to shake Samui's, then Naruto's hand. Feeling the man's callous palms only enforces Naruto's previous assessment. Sandeu grinned at them as he speaks again. "Allow me to formally introduce myself. I am a same Sandeu, manager for Fujisaki Yuki," he said with a slight bow. Naruto's eyes darted around the area as he let Samui deal with the client. He listened as the client confirmed the escort mission, informing them that they are protecting the movie set, and Samui got more details about the transportation as well as the reason for the pushing up of their departure. It is a few minutes later that a man came running up to Captain, panting as he said, "Sir, Yuki has escaped again." The man with a C cursed, "Fan out. I want her back here as soon as possible," he said, and the man saluted before running back the way he came. Sandeu turned to Naruto and Samui. Before the man can say anything, a puff of smoke appeared next to Naruto before being swept away as his newly made clone shins away. Samui looks at him with a raised eyebrow. "My clone will find her momentarily. I believe that it is this Fujisaki-san whom is to be our main responsibility, correct Sandeu-san?" he asked. "Yes, Yuki is quite rebellious," Sandeu confirmed as Naruto's eyes cloud over momentarily. "I've got her, but she had to be knocked out. Where is the ship so we can allow her to rest while we wait to leave?" Naruto asked. The guard's leader shot a surprised look at Naruto, but Naruto ignored it as Sandeu looked rather flustered. "Already?" he asked with a bit of trepidation in his voice. "Well, I suppose I should show you to the ship. Once Yuki is here, I will take you," he agreed. "Very well," Samui replied. 2 days later, in the morning, Naruto was intrigued by the blocks of ice that are dotting the sea's surface as the ship bobs on the waves. He sighed as he turned to look at the huge block of ice blocking their path forward. He turned to his right, speaking over his shoulder. "What's wrong, Samui-san?" he asked. Samui, though not outwardly irritated, stepped up next to him with an air of irritation that is easily visible to the younger Genjutsu master. "Nothing is wrong," she answered, though her voice sounded even more frigid than the ice block blocking their path. Naruto's lips twitched. "I take it Fujisaki-san is still opposing our trip?" he said with a small amount of mirth in his voice. Samui's only answer was to look at the same ice block as the director appeared on the deck. It took the director only a few moments before he declared that they were going to be filming on the large ice floating in their way. So Naruto made his way toward the bow of the ship and then onto the ice himself, which allowed Samui to go back to their ward. Samui had quickly told Naruto that it would be his responsibility to arrange watches with his shadow clones and for general protection as she protected Fujisaki, considering she would be able to accompany her inside her dressing room. Naruto hadn't argued at all, and he was certainly reaping those benefits as he saw how easily Yuki was capable of getting underneath even the cold Samui's stoic behavior. Naruto's eyes swept the iceberg as he stretched his sensor, now capable of feeling up to 100 yards from himself to the edge of his range. Naruto was confident of his ability to sense anyone within 30 yards of his own position, almost like an absolute field where he can feel every living thing within his sphere. Outside of this sphere, he was confident of his ability to sense anything larger than a civilian. Once he was satisfied that he can feel no living things that he deems a threat, he sent a small nod to Samui, who only then allowed Yuki off the boat and stayed close to her as they walked to the small heater set up to warm the actors until the shooting can begin. Like a well-oiled machine, the director and his crew quickly set the scene upon their chosen stage. Naruto was slightly impressed with the speed with which the crew moved, but he supposed that with the director constantly yelling at them with orders it would be hard to take their time. The way the stagehands shivered from the cold probably also increased their work ethic. In short order, the director called for Yuki along with the rest of the actors to take their places and the scene began to be recorded. It was maybe 20 minutes later that Naruto's head twitched and his eyes scanned the mounds of snow on top of the glacier they were standing upon. His fingers twitched as he surveyed the land, wondering what the hell it was that put him so on edge when he couldn't sense anything within range. It was right when Yuki's enemies started to yell that Naruto's eyes widened, and he yelled out, "Samui!" Right at that moment, there was a flurry of activity as 3 people moved at the same time. Naruto's hand blurred and a drift of snow was suddenly blown into the air from the explosive note he had sent its way. Samui appeared next to Yuki, grabbing the woman around the waist and pulling her back towards the ship as a man appeared from the snow drift Naruto had just destroyed. Naruto's eyes narrowed and his hand seemed to twitch twice more before 2 more snow drifts were destroyed and 2 more people appeared from the snow. As the snow settled, Naruto moved in front of movie crew. His opponents had positioned themselves so that they had him surrounded. A man in front of him, a man to his right and a woman to his left. The one in front of him had blue hair, green eyes and a scar on his right eye. His face was framed with a mask-style Hitai-8, like Kisame's, as did the man on his right. The man on his right was also heavy-set, purple-haired and had beady little black eyes. The sole woman was wearing a gray helmet, out of which stuck 2 pigtails of pink hair. Her eyes were green as well. Each of them were garbed in blue and white clothes that had metal contraptions that accentuated them. The man in front of him had his left shoulder covered in metal. The big man on his right had a gauntlet that ran from his shoulder to cover his left hand, and what seemed to be a board of red and black strapped to his back. The woman had small upside-down V's of metal. "Well, well, well," the blue-haired man said from in front as he stood with his arms crossed in front of Naruto. "What interesting bodyguards you have, Princess Koyuki," he said. "Welcome back to Yuki no Kuni. Did you bring the hexagonal crystal?" The pink-haired woman asked with a patronizing smile. "Your uncle has missed you so," she said mockingly. Naruto's eyes traveled between the 3, keeping them within his sight as he digested what they said. Naruto looked over his shoulder. The entire crew seemed transfixed as they watched the ninja staring each other down, but Samui had already started subtly moving Yuki towards the boat. "Flowing golden hair shaped in the same style as your master. The blue-haired man's voice snapped Naruto back to the opposing ninja. Icy cold blue eyes, gray clothes, and a chakra pool with a size to rival Kisame Hashigaki and the one-tailed Shikaku. No doubt about it, he said as he stared Naruto down. You're the one they call Konoha's Blade of Illusion, Uzumaki Naruto, he said, and Naruto feels a rush of nostalgia because he hasn't heard that name in almost 3 years. Regardless, Naruto doesn't drop his guard as he looks at the man. You know my name, but I don't know yours, he retorted. Roga, Nadar. The man in front of him said. Motioning to the girl, he said, Kakayoku, Fubuki, and Fukuma Mizore. He supplied as he pointed at the heavy-set man. We are ninja of Yuki no Kuni, he said. Naruto shrugged. Is there a reason you are here? He asked. He had a nagging suspicion that Yuki wasn't all she appeared, especially with the way Sandayu had tensed when they mentioned this supposed princess. Nadar looked at Naruto like he was an idiot as Fubuki began laughing at him outright. Naruto showed no signs of irritation as he looked at them with an impassive gaze, though he did keep a close eye on Mizore as the big man simply eyed the crew like they were obstacles. You mean you don't even know who you're transporting? Fubuki finally gasped out through her laughter. I don't need to know who I'm protecting to accomplish my mission, Naruto retorted. Regardless, is there a reason we cannot pass? He asked again. You can pass, Nadar said, but Naruto remained alert. As soon as Princess Koyuki is handed over to us along with the hexagonal crystal, then you can go into Yuki no Kuni, he demanded as he looked at Naruto. Naruto sighed before he snapped his eyes open, his hands blurring through hand seals before he spoke. Genjutsu. Jigaku no Boyuan. Naruto was already moving as he felt his chakra attack his opponents, but he faltered slightly when his chakra made it close to each of them and then suddenly dispelled. Naruto reappeared from where he had disappeared a few steps forward as he looked at the 3 ninja in front of him with a cocked head. The smug smile on Nadar's face was slightly annoying, but Naruto simply took a closer look at their clothing. First, you managed to avoid being detected by my sensor, and now my Genjutsu won't work on you, Naruto said almost to himself. Our chakra armors? Do you like them? Nadar asked as he looked down upon Naruto. His smug smile was now reflected in his eyes as he gloated. The metal contraptions on their clothes were now a bit more interesting to Naruto, but he was interrupted from pondering more on this. They drain your chakra while empowering our own, protecting us from ninjutsu and genjutsu. Your genjutsu are useless, Nadar gloated. Naruto blinked, then blinked again and suddenly disappeared from sight. The only sign of his speed was the snow that was suddenly kicked up as Naruto appeared in front of Nadar with a frown. Idiot, he said as he slammed the dark blue Rasengan in his hand against the man's chest. Just before the ball of swirling chakra managed to land upon the man's chest, however, a purple barrier sprung to life around him. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he pressed his hand forward against the man, but Nadar only smirked. For a long moment, Nadar smirked at Naruto as Naruto pushed against the barrier, feeling the Rasengan's chakra being siphoned off. Naruto pushed a bit more chakra into the ball and pushed a bit harder. The stalemate continued, despite Naruto's actions. It did have an effect on Nadar, however, as the confident smirk he wore slowly morphed into a frown as Naruto's Rasengan continued to battle against the purple barrier. For one more moment, Naruto's Rasengan hung in the air, separating Naruto from Nadar, before a cracking sound was heard, ringing through the cold air like the sound of a warning bell. Nadar's frown turned to a frightened open mouth and Naruto was pleased he had managed to break the man's confidence with the chakra armor, but his eyes darted to his right, where Mizore's gauntlet fist was making its way towards Naruto's face. Naruto cut the flow of chakra towards his Rasengan, swinging himself back and away from Nadar and Mizore's punch with a single back flip as he readied himself for a fight. He was slightly surprised when Nadar took a step back from Naruto. Retreat. Mizore, Fubuki, he said in a strained voice as he looked at Naruto. Mizore and Fubuki looked at him in surprise, but as he turned, his cracked shoulder piece flashed and their faces drained of color as they followed their leader up and away from the glacier. Naruto blinked as they disappeared. He felt an urge to go after them and kill them to avoid future complications, but his mission was to protect Yuki, not kill them, so they were allowed to live until they tried to take her again. Naruto remained alert for a few more minutes before he turned and looked at the crew, all of whom were looking at him with slack jaws. Naruto felt the need to scratch the back of his head, but he managed to avoid his usual nervous tic, but he felt a small bit of trepidation appear as he beheld the starry-eyed director whom, he was sure, was already working on how he was going to use Naruto in his movie. Naruto looked over at Samui. The woman's normally chilly gaze held a hint of respect for him before it disappeared as she saw him looking at her. He looked over at Yuki, whom seemed mesmerized by the show of power that had just taken place before her. Her eyes were locked upon Naruto's hands. Naruto's fingers twitched, but he shook his head subtly before turning to the director. "I believe it would be best to be moving along, director. This glacier may fall apart at any moment," he said. The director nodded and immediately ordered all of his crew back onto the ship as Naruto moved towards Yuki and Samui. His eyes caught Sandayu. He was making his way over as well, so Naruto was satisfied for now. Naruto reached Samui quickly. Looking her up and down, he was quickly satisfied that she was fine before he turned to wait for Sandayu to get there. A few minutes later, the four had joined and Samui spoke. "Let's get to the ship before we continue this," she said, and Naruto nodded. He grabbed hold of Sandayu and Samui grabbed Yuki. The four disappeared in a swirl of wind. The four appeared on the deck of the ship, Naruto making a few Kage Bunshin as they arrived, and they all disappeared in their own shunshin to take over being the guard duty as Samui and Naruto got to the bottom of this information he had been given. Samui led the party of four down into the ship and into the conference room of the captain, checking it for any people in there before she let Yuki and Sandayu into the room, followed by Naruto, who took position near the door. "Explain," Naruto said, and the tone in his voice left no doubt as to what he was referring to. Sandayu hesitated only a moment, looking over at the still shocked Yuki as he began his tale. He told them about how Yuki no Kuni had been a peaceful nation until 13 years ago, when the previous king and Koyuki's father, Kazahana Sosetsu, had been murdered by his brother, Dotu, whom had risen up and overthrown Sosetsu's rule because he wanted the wealth and power. He had discovered, however, that Sosetsu had used all of the wealth, or hidden it away. Sandayu told them of how most of Yuki no Kuni believed Koyuki to be dead, killed with her father the night Dotu took over, but how Sandayu had come to find her working as an actress. He had then worked his way up the ladder to become her manager and then manipulate the movies so he could bring Koyuki back to Yuki no Kuni so she could take her rightful place. The glare Koyuki had sent Sandayu left no doubt in Naruto's mind that the young woman was vehemently against running this kingdom. Sandayu ended his passionate speech saying how happy he was that Koyuki was still alive and that the country had been given hope because she was alive, to which she responded, "I wish I had died that night," she said, shocking Sandayu. "Even if I am alive, my heart is dead. My tears have dried. Please, princess," he pleaded from on his knees. "I will protect you with my life. Please come free your country from your uncle's rule." Koyuki stared at him for a long moment. Naruto and Samui shared a look as they looked upon the scene. "No," Koyuki said as she looked down upon her manager. Sandayu was crying in sadness, but Naruto scoffed. "What did you expect?" he asked. He could feel a small amount of bitterness from what Sandayu had done reflected from what the Sandame had done to him. "You took her from the life she had chosen, thrust upon her the burden of your agenda, and then forced her to go along even when she constantly told you she never wanted to see the place again," he said harshly, and he could see Sandayu looking at him with a crushed look while Samui was looking at him with a calculative gaze. Koyuki had an intrigued look on her face. "Even if you managed to defeat Dotu, Koyuki-san would make a horrible queen because she wouldn't even care about her subjects," he said. Samui nodded once, looking at the two with a cold gaze as Koyuki blinked in surprise, then nodded herself. She had been taught from a young age about ruling people, and she knew that caring about your subjects was the basis for everything she was taught. Sandayu looked even more crushed, but Naruto just sighed. "Why did they want this hexagonal crystal?" he asked, looking at the crystal which now dangled from Koyuki's neck. He wasn't going to waste time trying to talk Koyuki into doing what she should. His job was to protect her. That was it. He already regretted telling Sandayu something when he could have just kept his mouth shut. Sandayu wiped his tears away as he replied, "The crystal is the key to unlocking the treasure of Yuki no Kuni, according to Sosetsu-sama. He entrusted it to Koyuki-sama because of his belief in a brighter future." Naruto nodded at the older man and looked over at Samui. "If the movie is to continue being made then, I believe we have no choice but to accomplish the mission even if we ultimately end up fighting a complete country to allow Koyuki-san to act. Is there any reason or loophole in the contract that allows us to turn this ship around to avoid that or for us to abandon the mission? He asked. Samui immediately shook her head and Naruto sighed. It would seem, Sandayu-san, that your machinations are in your favor. You have our protection until the end of the movie, Naruto said, looking at Samui, who confirmed his words with a simple nod. Is there anything else you have hidden from us that could be used to surprise or increase the difficulty of this mission further? Naruto asked. Sandayu shook his head and Naruto met Koyuki's eyes for a moment before he nodded. I'm going to enforce the guard, he said as he stepped outside the door and sighed deeply. His first mission after his training trip, and he was about to take on a country, it seemed.